and I will be the one driving this webinar for the rest of this session until 12:30, more or less, at least if you are in our time zone. And I will be covering Scaled Agile and that whole dilemma that sort of relies around having a PMO or being within a PMO, or perhaps even leading a PMO. Because one thing is that PMO used to be a project management office. In these times of agility and agile and even Scaled Agile, quite often we see people don't describing their work as projects, but as initiatives, epics, and similar. So if it's a project management office and you don't have any projects, then what are you managing? That's sort of the dilemma I want to bring in. Then, of course, looking at tools, portfolio management, agility from a tooling perspective, and showcase how it could look like as well. And then I wrap up at the very end as well with some Q&A that is open for you to already ask now during the event, and I will then take all of them at the very end and respond to them. So, Scaled Agile and PMO dilemma. For the record, I've been around in 18 years now, or more or less, doing project portfolio management as a consultant, as a Microsoft MVP, as the founder of this company today with 50 people working more or less all over the globe in this field of portfolio management, project management, and innovation management. And of course, Scaled Agile is something that I've looked a lot into in the past few years, also based on that the trends in the markets have been that large organizations have also looked into it. So to keep up with that, I've got quite a lot of work and blogging, and also trying to impact this market trend through my blogs, for instance, at Forbes and in other councils that I'm a part of at Microsoft as well. So just quickly, our company works with quite a few different companies or customers from different sectors. They are all typically a little bit complicated or complex in their operating models. They are unique. So what we do is try to ensure that we can help them streamline their operating models, also to support Agile. We've been Partners of the Year worldwide a few times in the project space and portfolio management space. And in the last year or so, 1.5 years, we've moved into being what is called a Power Platform partner. And essentially that means we focus on connecting strategies to work. And in between those, you can have projects, initiatives, teams, portfolios, and many other things that I'm going to cover today. So how we help, and I think this is also relevant for everyone on this call, and those who will be seeing the video later on, is that we do understand and respect that talking about projects is not enough, and at least not in 2020. We have work as a general thing, work that needs to be planned and executed and reported upon. That work might be a project or a program or an investment of some sort, or maybe even a team that you are funding. Rather than funding projects, you're funding people. And then you have the whole people management aspect around that. Who is working on what? Do we have capabilities or capacity to do more? Which roles do we have? Who should we hire? Do we have too many? And so on. So one thing is for sure, that even though Agile speaks to the fixed team of size, it's pretty evident that in these times, nothing is fixed at all. So even a fixed team in terms of size might have to be resized and reshaped or reconnected to a new strategy, simply because times are pushing us to do changes so fast right now. It was fast before COVID. It's even faster now. So nothing is static any longer. And especially the people managers, those who are managing people and saying, you know, you're hired or you're fired, they also have to have a say in how we manage work. So that's why we see a close connection to that world as well on how to do things. Up here, we connect to a higher purpose. And again, people who work Agile, sitting in teams, need to, even though they sit within the same sort of circle, working on the same product, they also need to see themselves connected to the higher purpose. All recent studies point at purpose within the company being a #1 priority to get that feeling of wanting to stay in the company as a person. So if we don't connect the agility to a higher purpose, we're losing out on something called motivation, drive, and so forth. So up here we have strategy, which is something we plan top down. The direction, the drivers, the tangible, the intangible stuff, the portfolio buckets we set up before next year starts, the funding of people, the funding of money. And this is typically where that the Agile world meets the traditional world. Up here, you also report on quotas, CapEx, OpEx, ROI, NPV, and so on. And you promise deadlines to your shareholders, to the market, to your customers, and to your employees internally. So this is not only agile up here, it's much more than agile, exactly like Vartika just said. Story points are quite often not represented at that level, as an example, or epics in that language. It's something else that can go into your financial statements as well. And at the very bottom, we have data quality, governance, security. This is typically where lots of people in the PMO function spend their time, driving or harvesting data so that it's on time and ready and in the form we need it. And that whole workload can be quite time consuming, leaving very little time at the top up here to actually think strategically, which is why most PMO functions end up becoming that police force that is harvesting the data, defining the rules, keeping track on if people are following the rules, and maybe doing a report here and there to your upper management team. We want the PMO function to cover the whole aspect here and spend as much time as possible up at the top level up here. So trends and agility, I obviously, due to my own blogging at Forbes, keep up with what's going on. And I found two very recent studies that I find very interesting and also in light of what we're talking about today. First one comes from McKinsey, which is also obviously impacted from that whole COVID situation we're in. But the interesting part here is that agile companies, those who have been agile before they went into this pandemic, have done much better than those who were not agile before. So I think that sort of stands on its own. And then what does better mean? Well, it comes to both financial performance, people motivation, and people performance as well, and customer satisfaction. Probably the three most important aspects of your business are much better positioned also through this crisis if you are thinking agile, working agile, and not just on the software development level, more generally speaking. And as you can see as well, some of the most important parts here and we don't want to go through all of them today. I just want to share the deck after this session is done. But number one, have this common purpose and clear communication. And nothing is better than connecting work that takes place directly to the North Star or whatever you have in your business that is of the most important from a purpose perspective. And quite often we see that that link is not established. And even more important is it that we can fund this and track that we are spending the right amount of time and money on that initiative so that we all know why we are prioritizing like we are. And if the strategy changes, as it should and as it would in these times, then of course we need to readjust everything we're doing, from the teams that we are running to the money we are spending to perhaps the projects that we need to close down or whatever else we need to readjust. So this is highly recommended reading for those of you who are thinking agile and also are sort of trying to balance everything right now in these times of lots of changes. The other interesting study I have here is coming from BCG, came out a few months ago as well. Interestingly here, several employees across different companies have been asked in terms of from the period when COVID kicked in until June, what happened from a productivity perspective that I really have an interest in. And what we can see, if I zoom in just a little bit, is that most actually think that working from home has improved their productivity on the tasks that they manage themselves, or the tasks they manage for other people, or as a management function. But when it comes to the collaborative tasks, if you're sitting working from home, then 56% says they are less productive than before, which I find interesting. So when we hear people explaining that we are all more productive when we're sitting at home, because that has been sort of the trend, especially in the Nordics where I'm sitting, well, it depends on what you're doing. And then, of course, we have those people who can't work from home because they're simply working with other people who are their customers, or they are working in a hospital and similar. So for sure, collaborative tasks, which is in fact what an agile team does. It is in fact what a project team does, working around tasks in collaboration with others. That, of course, is something we need to pick up on and take seriously in these times. So again, on the right-hand side, what was sort of the output of this? Well, employees who are satisfied with their tools, and tools being digitally supported tools, are twice as likely to have maintained or improved their productivity on these collaborative tasks as those who do not have the right tool. And that is why we are thinking that today is an interesting topic, both from a scaled agile trend perspective, but especially also from a COVID-19 perspective. So this was just me trying to set the scene. and something that I find very interesting, and also hopefully you'll want to read up on these articles for inspiration. So, impact on the PMO function. See, I also wrote an article, which is back in January this year, around the identity crisis of a PMO in these times of digital and agile. So not in time of COVID, because this was just before we really understood that COVID was going on outside of China. And back then, again, various studies pointed at that executives actually looked at the PMO function as a driving force when it came to the transformation that the organizations were doing or are doing. So an important function. And still I found that most of these PMO functions that I know quite a lot of globally had difficulties explaining their purpose in the new context after the transformation had kicked in or during the transformation to being digital. So the whole idea was that we had a project management office in the past. The same people were still there. Suddenly we didn't call things projects anymore, or at least some parts of the business were not called projects. We didn't know if it was products, programs, portfolios. Maybe we don't even need the PMO anymore. And that old purpose of servicing the project managers with the right tools, the right methods, the right processes, almost acting as a mentor and driving reports to upper management, that purpose suddenly went away and had to be replaced with a new purpose. And I saw that most of these PMO officers or directors sort of had to do this transition themselves, which was, of course, not easy and still isn't easy. So I wrote a little article about that, also something we can't go into the details of today, but I'm just going to try and highlight a few of these key learnings that we sort of found in that process. So one thing is for sure, regardless of the function that you have to connect the dots to strategy. And then we can argue that's a strategy officer or similar approach, but essentially, if you can connect strategy to work taking place, then I think you are more than 50% done with your work. But of course, that also requires that strategy is available, tangible, broken down in something that you can actually connect to, that behind any investment, be it a team that we invest versus a project we invest in, then in both situations, we need to understand that this investment is connected this way to some sort of strategy driver or strategic theme, which would be the name in Scaled Agile, and so on. So the other part here is that if Agile teams have fixed capacity, which is essentially what most are doing when they set up a team, especially if it's a real pure DevOps team, if it's a fixed capacity and we don't keep track on the benefits they're producing, then we sort of have an investment that we don't know what pays back to the business. And then we can have a new discussion on how agile we are on the portfolio level and the strategy level. Because it sounds very static to have something that is fixed, not exactly tracking how that is performing that function, and still continuing to allow it to just keep going with the same money put into it. In this case, people going to work in that team every day. So of course, nothing is fixed in this world. We will try to fix and ring fence people so that they can focus on their products or their releases or whatever we want to call it, projects for that matter. But we have to be open for being able to change things in case of changes. And we are definitely in times of changes right now, or at least most are. So, just a second. Yeah, I just got, there's a question here, sorry, for adding the URL to the reports in the discussion. Yes, I'll make sure that happens afterward. It will be in the slides as well for the record. So when it comes to designing, let's say the portfolio piece is what really connects to the strategy. And then we can go back into what is inside the portfolio. And I have limited time today still, because I think this is a really important and complex topic. So again, we'll try to fast track it. And of course, I'm open for Q&As and other discussions with all of you seeing this at a later point in time. So portfolio design is first off that most are trying to organize their work in portfolios, and for that portfolio that is typically connected to a function or a strategy of some sort, and funded top down as well before next year starts. I always mention it as a container almost. You have a container of a certain size with a label on it, and then you have to shovel in the work, be it projects, teams, products, programs, whatever it is, and see how much you can fit inside of that container. But of course, the container has a breaking point where it's not fun to be inside of it any longer. And that is where things go wrong. So looking at this screen, I'm simply trying to explain that the transition from being traditional up here to being scaled agile all up, in this context, having no project managers by title, everything is the safe framework, then the direct path to this, I don't believe exists. There will be a ride that we have to go through a journey. And in that time, you are not agile all up, you are not traditional all up, you are something in between. And some tend to stay in that in-between scenario because it works for them. The reason why I highlight the hybrid scenario, where you have a traditional strategy, traditional portfolio management, and then you have some agile initiatives and agile, traditional projects inside the same. The reason why this is in this color is because this is most often what we run into. Doesn't matter if it's in bid rounds where we have to sort of compete and sell software, or if it's just doing workshops and consulting. Most organizations, when really challenged on this, consider themselves being hybrid, even if they have a safe model applied somewhere in the business. Then we have Agile with a PMO, where we don't have project managers, it's Scrum Masters, product owners, and so forth, but we still have traditional project, story portfolio, and strategy management up here. And the reason for this being traditional is that the reports that we are doing on that top level needs to be able to be pushed into a financial statement at some point in time, where we have to look at capitalizing our workload or CapEx projects that needs to go into your bottom line in your reports. Group by quarters if it's a public traded company, and so on, profit loss analysis and all of that. That is why it's not as easy as just saying scaled agile all the way through to the highest level. Bi-modal is where you break up your works into an agile bucket and a traditional bucket, or two different portfolios. We see that quite often in R&D, where the initial early on product development process, even before you approve the big projects or the big investments, you do an agile experiment almost, trying to see if you can actually do it, what you want to do. And if that works out, it goes through the gates up here and becomes a real project with a timeline where we have to stick to the plan and the promises to the shareholders, to the business, to the customers. So another way to explain this, and to really be sure that there are different buckets here that we all understand, at least how we think here in Projectum. If we were to see this sort of drawn up, then again, up here we have the vision and the mission and the overall strategy being set and changed quite often these days by the upper management, the directors, or maybe even the shareholders, if that's the meeting we're talking about. This translates into how many people and how much time, typically a financial year, of course, or quarters or months, and how much money that we want to keep track of and invest in this. And this is where the first enterprise PMO typically is, if it's a large organization. The function that don't really care about if it's agile or not, but who tries to be the glue between everything. If it's a really big company, you would often find that there's a PMO function on top of this down here, this one, and that one. But essentially what we're trying to do is look at waterfall projects and services sort of into the same way. Both typically have a plan. It might be that the waterfall projects or the traditional projects start off by being an idea that becomes a business case. But in the service section, it's typically a customer who reaches out and wants a contract. So up here you have a business case that you promised to deliver on. Down here you have a contract. But from there and going forward, it's typically the same thing. We have a plan we try to stick to. We want to track our KPIs on if we're making it on time, spending too much money, not enough money, having the right resources, and essentially reporting until we are done with this project. Both would be projects in this case. This makes it easy to report on money, people, and time, because it's all planned ahead and easy to track on. On the right-hand side, we have the agile teams who do not run the projects. We can call that a DevOps function if it's an IT, but it could also be any other function. Here we just work and do things around a purpose and constantly ship updates when we feel like it, through release trains if it's Scaled Agile or other ways of doing it. This is not the same as an Agile project, of course. An Agile project is still a project with a framework agreement around it, but where we ship perhaps at the very end or only a few times along the way. It's two different things, because down here we funded a team, up here we funded a project. And I see many organizations mixing this up when they say we are running DevOps, we are running Agile. And then I sort of ask, so are you funding people or are you funding projects or initiatives? And it becomes difficult for them to explain exactly what it is. So we have a way of sort of differentiating the two. Now, the important part here is that both in an agile project and a DevOps initiative or context, we have people. So we should still be able to look 3 months ahead, next 3 months, then 6 months ahead, then the future, so after 1 year, and look at how many FTEs or people we have decided to put into this initiative or team down here. And of course, calculate using cost rates. How much cost is that actually if we are to have this team of that size? And because we then have a team going to work every day, that means we have time, we have people, and we have money, but in a never-ending context in some certain way, so that, of course, until you stop this team, it will continue to spend money. So, of course, it's relevant that we keep track on the payback or the benefits they're producing. But this makes it possible to compare money to money, people to people, and time to time into one database and roll it up so we can do performance management on all of these 4 boxes. It's not easy, but it's definitely something you have to do and something that, again, is relevant. And I think the more we can explain this to both the agile world and the less agile or traditional world inside the same company, the easier it will be to have people do what we need to do, even though it, sometimes doesn't create the most value for themselves. They do it because they understand it creates value to the business as a whole. All right, so again, Scaled Agile, it is not what I'm going to cover today in details. It comes, of course, in very different variations, from large to small, some with a portfolio level. There's a model without it as well. The idea again here is that when people say we are Scaled Agile, quite often I find that, well, you might be that in one part of your business, but it's only in this part or in some other part of the business, which means, again, that there's something else running. So we still need to aggregate what people are doing, and if we are lucky, connect everything to a strategy. So be you safe all up, then you're typically the Spotify organization. And I have another reflection here, which I want to share, is that those who are saying that they are inspired by Spotify or inspired by, similar types of companies, they tend to have the same revenue model, which is that they sell subscriptions and make money every month by their user base. So if they all go on vacation for 2 weeks and forget about the company, more or less the same amount of money will kick in the next month. Now, those who are in a production company producing products, physical products, or like me in consulting, if we go on vacation for 2 weeks, we have another problem. Nothing will just come in as normal. So, of course, you can organize around and be inspired by companies who are an all-up revenue, so a subscription-based company. But I don't think we should try to just take that recipe and copy it if you are in banking, where you have to do certain things that is not just one subscription per user coming in every month. It's a whole different operating model. So the inspiration is good, but that's why I see that so many large companies that we work with takes parts of the Scaled Agile framework, and then other parts they keep traditional, allowing them to aggregate things higher level wise. So keeping track of time here. So when it comes to modern tools, portfolios, agility, then again, we have decided to work with a platform that supports all of it. And again, based on studies and what we see people need, and especially now being disconnected or working from home, we need a platform more than just a product. And we want people to be able to work the way they prefer. So with the tool of choice almost, I'm going to share different ones today. But still connecting the dots in a portfolio strategy context. And the Power Platform, which is a big thing coming from Microsoft, not brand new. It's been out for quite a while. But this is the platform we are building and advising everything around when it comes to IT. Because simply that it's the most flexible place to go and build without code, build a solution for your PMO function, for your project managers, your agile epic owners, your team members, management, and so on. And it is that because we can control all the entities of work. We can define that whole operating model inside this system without code and still go into production and run it as a business critical system. Power Apps comes with a Power Platform, with Power BI that most, I guess, know already. It's probably the #1 tool used for reporting these days. It wasn't 3 years ago, but today it is. We have Power Apps, which is mostly what I'm going to show you today. We have Power Automate, which is the automation of any process, stage gate model, approval flow, ideation intake, and so on. And then we have the virtual agents that quite often people don't really care about. and they never ask for. But when we show them what we can do with that, also without code, 90% says we need something like that in some context, so that we can take that repetitive questioning that happens every day and make that become something that is more self-service for the users, and especially when people are working remote. The really cool thing here as well, not going through all of these, is that we can also import data from different sources using a service. So the integration scenario that used to be very complex is now something we offer as a service based on the Power Platform. So if you have data in Azure DevOps or in Jira, maybe even in a spreadsheet or in SAP or Oracle, we can pull it in to your portfolio in the right buckets, so we can aggregate the whole data as a service, not as a development exercise. And that's one of the biggest thing I believe in this place. This means that we connect data, put it into one central data repository called the Common Data Service. Then we can, at some point in time, begin to do machine learning also as a service on top of it to predict cost overruns, predict team performance, and other things that you find interesting to predict. So when we establish the scene, and especially around the topic talking point today about Agile, we consider teams down here as people who are grouped around work. They execute it, they plan it, they talk about it, they run video meetings like we are right now, perhaps using Microsoft Teams, hopefully. And of course, this is what we need to connect to something. And we can't say it's connected to projects any longer, because it can be many more things than just projects. So what we at least try to do is connect it to some sort of higher purpose or direction or portfolio. Quite often we see that people define that they have IT portfolios as one bucket. They have enterprise portfolios, that would be your business projects. We can always discuss if IT is in fact business, but typically we see that could be product development, physical products, pharma products. Then we have digital product management, which is where Scaled Agile most often is used. That's the production and continuously improving of software, of course. And then we see those who are merging and acquiring new companies a lot, who both want to manage all of that in a portfolio before they merge and after they merge, which is also called PMI. It's a little bit conflicting with the Project Management Institute. In this case, we're talking about post-merger integration, which is this typical 100-day plan where you have to do lots of things at the same time. So almost managing it as a portfolio or program to achieve, obviously, a full merge. The good thing here for us is that we've looked into this and sort of understood, at least in our minds, that lots of these portfolio types share the same capabilities, the same tools sort of are needed, or features. Something to put in your strategy in, something to financially forecast what you're going to spend and how things are progressing. Demand management, portfolio management, governance, initiatives, teams that needs to collaborate, stakeholders, and so on and so forth. So these are what we looked into and why we made a solution that I'm going to show today, which is a Power App on the Power Platform that can then connect to other systems that are perhaps better tailored for the scheduling part. If we are to then look at this from a business context, I'm trying to set the scene over and over again in this session today and sharing as much as I can from the past couple of years. Then we have a framework here that we decided to call Controlled Agility. It might be a little bit conflicting, those two labels, but it is in fact what we are seeing that the market is asking for. We want to be agile, but under controlled circumstances, on the money side, people side, and time-wise as well. So the way we define it is that we consider, first of all, that innovation and new ideas being for everyone. That's the big circle. I'll show that later as well. Strategic planning, setting up portfolios, monitoring the performance, also the payback, even from your agile work, is something that goes on up here. This connects through some sort of governance. You can't just spend money unless you are allowed to. We can call that a stage gate model, but even in the agile world and SAFe, we have the Epic portfolio Kanban board, which is in fact a stage gate model as well, which I'm going to show you later live. So for each project model, large projects, small projects, agile projects, traditional projects, there will be a certain governance connected to it. And for each model, there will be unique processes that the project manager or the product owner or the program manager, depending on the role title, that they need to stick to and work with. So for instance, once a week, you have to update your KPIs on this one. Once a month, you have to submit a new resource request and readjust the plan. So these processes need to be written down so we understand the rules. Then on the two flanks, the right-hand side flank here, we have people management. Here I request resources for a purpose by role typically and skill. Here I'm given real named people. This is where we also have a tool for that process. So it might be that you are doing resource management inside your agile tooling, DevOps, Jira, even your project plans. But it's pretty rare for me to find people in a scaled agile context, as an example, who are allowed to fire and hire people. I just don't see it. So we are back to that. The essence of people management in a matrix company is still around. And therefore, we have to sort of connect what we're doing and why we're doing it to those people in that function as well. Then we have time sheeting on the left side, something that most agile teams really don't like. Quite often, it also doesn't make sense. But if you are to capitalize and activate that investment in your financial statements, there are certain countries where it's a rule that you have to timesheet to have evidence on what you built, what was produced, when what is produced, and so on. So timesheeting does apply for some, and regardless of agile or not agile. And then down here we have the scheduling. Are you scheduling a plan initially and try to stick to it? Or are you trying to manage changes as best as you can? This is the backlog approach, of course. But rather than calling it agile or not, we call it plan-driven or change-driven. Two different ways of thinking, but on top of both, most organizations still require reporting and performance tracking and sticking to, if not the plan, then the budget, etc. And here as well, we have collaboration being a thing that people, team members of any sort, need to do with their other people. This is what we saw in the study from BCG, that if you don't nail this one down here, you're going to lose out on a good productivity, and especially right now. We need to be sure that people who work in agile teams, normal projects, or maybe both at the same time, they have to timesheet, they have to talk through to their managers, planning vacation and other things, that they have a simple way of doing that, that is connected digitally as much as possible. So reframing this in an IT context, it could look something like this. This is just one example where we have portfolio management up here, or strategic execution, whatever we call it. And then we have the project management, not the scheduling yet, but the management of the business case or the investment taking place up here, the reporting as well. We can then connect that to the new Microsoft project that you're going to see today through tasks in any Dynamics or Power App system, through Azure DevOps, Planner, Jira, or whatever tool you have. And ideally, we consider tool of choice being the right approach here, but there are certain tools that are not very open API-wise for us to pull data in from. But these tools that you're seeing here, we can most definitely pull data in from and aggregate into your portfolio cockpit so that you keep track on what's going on. We then have two different toolings, Time for Teams and Team Planner as two options to do resource management and timesheeting. And again, it connects through to the Power Platform, allowing us to connect other systems without code and also connect through Power BI or Excel to all the data that is relevant in a portfolio situation and do reports on top of that as well. And if you want to snapshot everything, so you have the progression of data, the changes of data, so you can predict, we have something called Power Hub on top of that that allows you to easily also get that time phase data and how things were 1 month ago, 6 months ago, etc. So forwarding a little bit from this one, then those who are agile might think about how does it look like from an entity perspective? And of course, there are many variations of this. But to stick to sort of what we've done as a simple way to getting started, which is sort of, I guess, the topic today, we consider that you have strategic themes, which is also the same naming used in Scaled Agile up here, which could be the UN sustainability goals as a thing that many companies are looking into. Now, for this theme, UN has X amount of drivers that are tangible as well and described. And these drivers are tangible, which means that they should be connected to something that is going to be approved and executed. Sometimes that's a program, because that's an investment in itself. Other times, it's just a project or an initiative down here as well. But these two should be connected to drivers. And then we aggregate all of this to the portfolio or strategy level. Now, the portfolio should be connected directed to your strategic themes, so the higher purpose. And also we should plan ahead on how much money, for instance, are we planning to make on this strategic theme or driver or direction. So we also then at some point need to harvest the benefits, the actual realized benefits, and aggregate and roll that up from the initiatives or the projects to the portfolio level so that it can roll up and compare to the strategy level. Then we have the breaking point of when do you open up an agile tool like Azure DevOps or similar, if you are in the DevOps way of working, and break down your work over there. For those who are hardcore agile practitioners, it's typically around epics. We have portfolio epics and program epics. And the portfolio epics are typically defined as the business case. This is the lightweight business case, also used in Scaled Agile. That is where you have to put in time, effort, money, revenue or benefits, and describing how you're going to achieve it, and the KPIs. So typically, epics is something that is very much relevant to any portfolio function. But that's the portfolio epic. Below there, we have program epics, or we have stories, and we have sprints, increments, time at least, features, tasks, bugs, and many other things. This is where you can either go with Azure DevOps or Jira, but if it's more like an in-between thing, that you want a simple agile way of working with a Kanban board, not necessarily talking about story points or sprints, still tasks, just managed in an agile context, then the new Microsoft project can also help you out, and Microsoft Planner. So this was just an example on how it could look like. Then I have this slide before we go live, and this is for those who are the geeks in this call, perhaps like myself. So how have we done this before in the real world? So I just wanted to quickly show you that we have companies who use Power Apps before we go live here to create their strategies, set up their drivers, score them and weight them against each other so they have a prioritized strategy. Then we have where we set up the portfolios and the value stream. Essentially, we go in and we create the portfolio epics, all the projects. We have business cases, sometimes with what we call weighted shortest job first, so we can rank them. Governance, justification, cost, benefit, effort in hours, the typical approach to defining why you need a certain investment of a certain size. And the schedule with the high-level milestones or deadlines or deliverables. We can then connect that through to Teams so that there is a whole team in Microsoft Teams or a channel where the group can discuss and share documents and risks. We can then also make sure that once things are approved on the high level here, it goes through to DevOps or Jira and sets up the program epic so that the Agile team can break it down into features, stories, tasks, and depending on if they are Scrum-based or traditional Agile. Then again, we can roll up what is relevant from that Agile way of working. Typically, it will be your features and your program epics, who both share something, I believe, in sync, which is start and finish dates, some status, is it done, not done, and the overall effort. Maybe also who's actually doing it if you have many teams supporting the same revenue stream or program. This means that we can inject sprints and features, so high levelly speaking, getting some more details on the timeline up through to the portfolio level. Again, if you then want to add timesheeting, you would probably do that on the feature level or the epic level to capture, and that we can do because we now have it in the system. We aggregate actual hours up and then, of course, put it back into the portfolio and investment overview so you can see how much time has been spent on doing this. And when we compare time that has been spent to benefits, we can quickly do an ROI and see if this is a good investment, thereby comparing team A to team B, product A to product B, project A to project B. And out of that comes massive amounts of quality reporting, the capability to simulate and do what ifs on if we're doing the right thing, depending on strategy. So this is one example on what we have done in real life. And of course, going into details around that is not for this call. That's where you should reach out if you want to know more on how to do this and how it looks like also. So now I'm going to fast forward into showing you some live stuff. And we call it Power PPM, Advanced Project Portfolio Management or Work Management, which again connects with many different systems. So you will all get a copy of this deck. So just for the record, most of what I'm seeing, you can either see through the video, which is recorded and shared, but you can also go through the deck that you're going to get and see the different areas we cover and how it looks like. So it's fast forwarding to my tool like this. So now I'm going to go live and just quickly take a cup of coffee. And just looking at Jonathan here, any questions that we need to, okay, good to go. So I'm inside Teams right now. I could have started the journey and the demo anywhere. I could start in Project. I could start in Azure DevOps. I could start in Teams as we just were, or in Power Apps, or on my cell phone. Doesn't really matter because it's all connected. So to show you some different perspective on how we can actually do this, let me start off by simply just clicking here and going to Teams where we just were. And in this left corner, open up my bot. I actually have a virtual agent who helps me do certain things. I can also access this one almost as if it was a person using chat up here, where I can click there and write with it. I'm going to do it from this one down here to avoid sharing too much of what goes on in my Teams chat. So down here I can write, hey, for instance, and wait for it to respond. And it says, hey, I'm here. I can help you with certain things. What do you need? We can then say, I want to create an idea, or want to create a program or project, or set up a team, or get some help. Let's try to just click on create idea. And by the way, you can write it as well. You can also misspell it and it will know. So what is the name of the idea? Well, today it's the, oh, sorry, there we go, Swiss, let's call it initiative. Enter. What is the description of the idea? Well, I have this thing that is great and need funding. Clearly, this is not a business case person, but we'll get back to how we do that. How many months from launch do you expect for financial break even? So this could be many different questions depending on what sort of process you need. And you can write these questions, have people fill them in without writing code. So you can set up the chatbots as well if you want to learn it. Maybe 18 months. Has it been funded already? Well, no. And then it says in a few seconds, okay, that's great. Here's your idea. It's now been created. So when I click on this one, I'm immediately taken to the portfolio system and arrive down here at the ideation level. Let me just see if I can remove this one. It's a little bit annoying. Unpin and off you go. No. Okay, there we go. So we are down here in the intake area where I have challenges and ideas. And this idea just came in, Swiss Innovation or Initiative. It's me who did it. This is the description, 18 months arrives. As you can see, we can carry over everything from a chatbot. So change requests, identification of risks, whatever you need to do, we can do that. Let's quickly go in and establish a budget saying, I think this is going to cost us 500,000. I think benefits would be 2.5 million euros. We have multi-currency support as well. I'm going to rate it in terms of strategy. This could be a very complex questionnaire. I'm just doing it briefly today. Of course, these will be your field. When I hit save now, it calculates an idea score of 8 and the ROI of 4. And perhaps I can connect this to a business challenge of some sort, which could be the big data challenge. Now, what that means is that those who are managing the overall strategy typically have some challenges down here that are set up and open so that people can submit ideas against them. As you can see, number of ideas right now for big data is 5. If I click on it, we can then see that we are accepting ideas until the 1st of March. We will review these on the 1st of May. It's Carsten who is going to review them. We have not awarded anyone yet a winning award of this becomes a project or an initiative. And I can also see all the related ideas for this challenge, which they are right here. And this is where we find the Swiss initiative, and we are back again here. At some point in time, either through a stage gate model that I'm going to show you at some point, of course, we can create this as a project or as an epic or as a business case, whatever we want to call it. So if I click on the create project box here and hit save, in less than a second, typically, it creates the project or the initiative down here. That's how fast Power Apps is. Expect most things to take a second, if not less. So when I click on this one, I'm carried over to the project level or the epic level. We'll get back to epics. And from here, I have my overall business case. Now let's just go full screen just to share a little bit on how this looks like. So quickly, I have a stage gate model up here. This is standard in Power PPM and Power Apps. This is a process. I can have different ones of these. so depending on the type of project or initiative. I can click here and move ahead only if I have done what I should do from a governance perspective. So right now I cannot progress because I don't have a sponsor. I'm going to add myself as the sponsor. We can do that from the governance setup up here. And now we can move ahead to, for instance, business case, where we need to upload a business case. It can even be a physical file. It could also be that we have to say yes or no down here. So let's say that we have done what we should, and it's a manual check. I've done my scope. I've done my stakeholder review. Then in real time, even before I save it, this one will know that you are now compliant on this one and on that one. And again, you cannot move ahead before you've done what you haven't done. So really, really cool and fast performing way of doing governance. Let's do a project and open up something that has already been done, because we have, again, limited time today. So opening up the project overview, which could be a variety of project types. Some that are agile, some that are less agile, some that are executed in the new project for the web, some that are being scheduled at least in Jira, DevOps, or whatever you have, Planner for that matter. We then still have KPIs, we have ROI, we have currency, budget, forecast, which is so crucial for so many portfolio functions that it might be that they use tool A or B, but we still have to sort of aggregate everything so we get the overview and keep the transparency. Now, if you have lots of data, as many have, what is really unique about Power Apps is also that we can show charts like this and actually see, just a second, if I can remove this, that would be a little bit better. Just a second, go. And actually see how many projects or ideas we have in the initiate stage, in the business case, execution, or grouped by other things like financial forecast, or my financials by type. So grow type projects, run type projects, transform. And what is cool is that if I click on something, for instance, this one, in real time, you will see which projects or investments they are. So this is like, you don't have to go to Power BI to get a report, wait for it to refresh, then click a hyperlink to go back to the system. Here we are embedding the experience of having charts and real-time data connected to the view on the right side, which I find very important also in a function as a PMO. When I then open up a project like this one, accelerated growth as an example, we arrive in a place where lots is going on. Quickly get an overview on the work items and the status by task type. We can perhaps look at, are we delayed or not? What has started, what has not? We can see the financials up here. We can expand everything always like this, also super cool, and click on it, looking at, well, budget, that's a lot of budget, and then drill down into what sort of components are within that budget. For instance, the cost category, split by a pie chart, and find that this up here is CapEx, this is OpEx. And you can go even deeper and look into perhaps which year is it taking place, or which month is it, or whatever you want to sort of look into. Let's take years like this. And now you have it, the budget in OpEx in these 2 years for that investment. Not that many tools will do what I just did that fast with real-time data without leaving the page. So this is one of the main reasons also for why we decided on to go with Power Platform. Now, then we have the different custom fields you can, of course, use. You can connect to a portfolio, you can connect to a program, business drivers, and so on. We can also have different tooling, so primary task tool, project for web. If you decide to go with DevOps or Jira, you might have a different direct URL to that. You might have both in conjunction if it's a hybrid project. And if we click perhaps on this one, just to get to the timeline, if I click there, we will now go full screen in the new Microsoft project to also show how that works. So again, we have a grid view, we have boards, we have a timeline. So this can also be used for agile projects if it's not in hardcore software development, of course, where you have other things, test plans and so on connected. But so this is for the agile business projects, I would have to say, as a good starting point. So on the grid level, we can of course do other phases like phase 2, move it out to the same level as phase 1 here, do my task 4, task 5, milestone of some sort, sorry, like this. And then, group these by phase 2, add myself to this one, or add Andy, or add Andreas, like this, set up a duration, 20 days, have some text applied. You can have your own text fields up here. So for instance, hello, That's what I need to tag. My date field of some sort that you have added. These are your fields. You can move them around as well. And then we have something, just a second, like this, like % complete, effort remaining, and so on. But if it's more in a traditional context, you would most likely see it in a Gantt view like this. Let's zoom out a little bit. But you can also go in and connect the dots from this one. We want to connect to that one, and so on. And also click on it and update it with some details on buckets, and we'll get back to the buckets. How much work has been spent, how much is remaining, and so on. If we click on board, you'll get that agile feeling. You have buckets where you can set up and say, these are all my IT things, or you can actually write backlog and so on. We'll get back to that. But let's just tag it by type of task. IT, this is HR, this is software of some sort, doesn't matter. And then start, moving them around like this to get the overview. And this obviously reflects back on the grid so that your boards, if you add the boards over here, or the buckets, will be shown here as well. As well, we can change this view to not be grouped by bucket, but grouped by assigned to see which people have which tasks and do the same thing. We can have group by progress, which is sort of your backlog, in progress and completed. Using this automatically sets % complete to either 50, 100, or 0. If I do this and that and this, you can see % complete being added here. And we also have assigned, so the finish date, so we can see tomorrow, late tasks, no dates assigned, and what is completed already. The project is also an agile tool and a traditional tool, at least the new version of Microsoft Project here. All right, so back again to, just close this one down, go back here, and go screen. So that was one example. We'll get back to the DevOps part in a few seconds once we've covered the overall way of managing the business case. We then have ability to have resources managed and allocated this way. Let me just close this one down, where we have our overall, phases, like this. And underneath there, we can have different roles that we want to request from your line managers or resource managers. To do that is super easy. You can, on the right-hand side, find all the roles. Let me just switch to a project manager's view because I have both, like this. So when I click on this one, I can find different roles from different teams, or take the entire team, depending on how you work. Let's say we need some developers from team CHF. I can pull it in like this, and on different levels. Let's take on phase 2 or sprint 2. Could be sprints or increments, and then go in and say I'm gonna need 50 hours, 100 hours, and 80 hours, and 40 hours. And I would prefer one who speaks German. And that's it. So this is a request done for the resource manager. Then the resource manager can go into another view. We're just going to cover that quickly now, but this is also essential, I think, in the agile context. They will log on like this, see all their people in one view right there. Let me just write I need to search for the right project. Just a second. So, and see on the left side what has been requested from my business unit. On the right side, see all the people I manage, for instance, developers, and see how much capacity they have in this time period, even before I allocate them. So when I take, perhaps, let's take this guy, and pull in that, just saying I clicked on it because Siri said something, got confused. So I'm going to add that person into the request. So replacing the role-based request with a named person, and allocate him the 50 hours needed, the 100 hours needed, the 80 hours needed, or even split the work with others. If this was not possible because he was in deficit, like down here, then you can click on that person and balance his workload in real time. So you can see that here he's in minus 141 hours. Let's try and remove this one from his workload, this one as well, and this one. Now he's in a surplus of 88 hours. And then we go back, he's allocated to the project still, but he's not in a problem anymore with being overly booked. So this is where we're trying to replace a spreadsheet. And this is so crucial for your capacity planning later on in your portfolio context. So back to your projects, back to this one, accelerated growth. So beside resource planning, we then have KPI statusing, easily done, red, green, yellow, where we can write comments as well. and maybe you want to produce a simple Word status report from this view, you can click here, click there, and in real time, combine the data in the common data service, the database that is so much up to date, and click here, and there is your template merged with what we just did of the changes. It's added already. So that's something you can design as well without code. Financials can be done in many ways. This is a simple way of doing it. We have our own way of our own custom developed view that you can configure in custom cost dimensions and categories. We can simply go in here and collapse and expand and add some actual cost, which typically comes through from your ERP systems. But change that. Let's add another year, for instance, 2023. Expand again, and maybe add 500,000 here. Like this, 500,000 there. If that was the case. And now I couldn't save it. Sorry for that. I'm not allowed for 2023 in my setup. But instead, let's just write it down here. It doesn't matter. I can see I'm not allowed to change this. Maybe now it's coming. Just a little delay in the video I can see. So then we can aggregate, so we can see the summarized numbers in years or by cost dimension in one view. And this data is stored in real time, and therefore also when updating the front page, shown in real time up here as well. It updates immediately with the overall view. We have risks, where we can create risks and manage them also on Agile initiatives. And you can click here and see where certain risks are in your risk matrix. You can add new ones down here, or even edit them by just clicking here in like a bulk edit mode, almost, without having to leave and go in and out of each. You can create new risks very fast by just clicking new. And from this view, create your Swiss risk like this. Assign it to a certain task that you have in your system, have a probability or an impact statement, and hit save. And then the risk gets added and shown up here as well in real time. So besides that, we have changes and issues, same process as before. We can have a process for creating change requests. Others can see if they are approved or not. They can also see them in the view over here called My Risks, My Change Requests, My Tasks, My Everything. And from there, they can see everything across all initiatives or projects and work with it. Issues as well. Stakeholder management, where we have a stakeholder matrix that is customizable, where you can also create stakeholders and manage them, so you can see the communication form they prefer and do reports against that. Snapshots is where we can easily create a snapshot of what we just did. So to do that, we can just click, let me see, click new here and just simulate that we are now in January next year. My steering group snapshot, we just did a massive change, perhaps. This is the comment, and hit save. It dumps a new line down here. When I refresh this one in real time, you just got a new snapshot with the added new budget we just put into the financial grid just before. So very cool way of reporting your data. And also for those who want to push this into a PowerPoint, we even have you covered there with status reporting, where you can have your various PowerPoint reports as templates shown here. You pick one up, for instance, this one. You hit the generate report like this and hit the save button. Then it takes between 10 seconds to 1 minute to produce a new status report using that PowerPoint and combine it with data. We even inject data into the charts so that also the charts of your PowerPoint are rendered perfectly. So you can really make a cool looking report that typically everyone is asking for in the PowerPoint format, make a PDF out of it and ship it. And it will also be stored here over time. Let me just refresh this quickly to see if it's been created. So there we go, 29th of October, 12:04, using the template status report in week 44. Open it up. There is now a PPTX file. And if you click on it, it will show you in real time, because it just injected the data, a PowerPoint report that you can, of course, design and style with financials. The budget is here, 3.8. We just added it in. Issues, tasks, performance indicators, change requests, whatever else you want to do. This is just a basic example, including the project plan in some sort and shape. So if you're good at PowerPoint, we've got you covered. We can inject that data to you so you can design great looking PowerPoint reports with the click of a button. All right, going away from this one. So epics. Sometimes we have an agile project that still has, or initiative, where epics are part of that. That's one scenario. So therefore, we also allow you to have epics running underneath the project level. Business epics, enabler epics. If you are managing an all-up agile initiative, and especially in the safe context, Scaled Agile, you would most likely have your epics shown like this, with a Kanban board, which is sort of your stage gate model, and you can then move them back and forth here as well, depending on if they're approved or not and who you are. You can show this as a list view like this, where you can sort by priority. So mobile banking is number 1. We can show charting, and again, see all our epics from a funnel perspective based on enablers or business epics or architectural epics, and those who forgot to tag them the right way. And again, you can click here to see what's going on where, like this. So really powerful. Again, if we just refresh this one and go back to, sorry, I just want to go back to the very start. There we go, and here. So again, these epics, let me just find the one I had before, this mobile banking one. If I open this one up, it doesn't look like what I just showed you with the project, because here we don't have a project connected to it, but it still rolls up to a portfolio called the Lean Agile portfolio. But it doesn't go through a project. So this is an investment on its own, therefore a portfolio epic. What you can see is that we can type certain data in. We can also have a planned start date and a planned end date, high levelly speaking, for this epic. It has a status, it has cost, benefits, and so on. Now, every question you see on this screen comes directly from the Scaled Agile model, one-to-one. Same thing for the Lean business case, with descriptive text explaining how to enter in data. And also, if we click on creating a new one, when we hit the first save, so my, just a second, my Swiss epic, if I hit save now, it injects pre-populated data to help the user knowing what to fill in. That we can also do. And then, of course, we can connect this through to a funnel, stakeholders for that matter, and also have the features being pulled up from the underlying Agile execution tool, if you have that. So just going back again to the mobile banking, here we have the features coming through from your, in this case, Azure DevOps, and with the team and the remaining work, actual work, story points, so we can roll that up as well. The way to do that is that for each epic that is created and approved when it goes to the portfolio backlog, not before that, but once it hits portfolio backlog, we activate the creation of an epic over in Azure DevOps. So when I click here, I will see, or be navigated through, let's hope it works now, yeah, to Azure DevOps, where I have the same epic with the same text added and the same effort, the same priority, and also a URL or link back to the business case part where we came from. So that if you are sitting here, you can click and go to the business case or stay here. And of course, then break down your work into features, feature 2022, or create new features, or show this on a backlog and do your board management on a Kanban experience or with sprints and increments and everything that, of course, this one allows you to do in Azure DevOps. There are so many things you can do in Azure DevOps, so it's not just, of course, managing epics. That's for another demo, I guess. So this is how that works and operates. Let me just go back again to this one. So that's another example on how we can cover the Agile world. Let's now then sort of roll the whole thing up to our portfolio level. So up here, let me just take, sorry, this one. Let's take the Swiss project. We have the fastest search engine in this one, which is really powerful as well. When I hit Swiss, you'll find it immediately. If I connect this through to, let's say, Grow, our Grow portfolio, hit save. Then up on the portfolio level, you'll find your portfolios and the type of portfolio and the strategic theme connected to it. Currency, so that where we have a uniform currency because we roll up data, budget limits, portfolio limits, and so on. If I open up Grow, you will see that in this portfolio, it has a KPI. We can see all the financials coming in and rolled up to the portfolio level and compared to the portfolio budget limit to see if we are above or below. We could also time phase this if you needed to, like I showed earlier. We have related projects shown like this, including probably the Swiss initiative we just did. Remember, this one started by being an idea in Teams just 30 minutes ago, and now it's in the portfolio context, rolled up automatically. We have related programs, related epics if it's a hybrid portfolio, risks across everything that goes on. This is a massive risk matrix. So give it a few seconds to load. These are all risks from all projects and all epics in one view. Again, to give you an idea around what happens where in terms of a matrix. Issues is the same thing. All issues across everything in one view. We even have real-time dashboards from here. This is absolutely real-time. So our Swiss initiative down here shows up right here as well. Active projects by tooling. Which projects are using Power PPM? Which are using DevOps? Which are using Planner? And so forth. And active projects by stage, issues, whatever you need, we can do it here. But we also have the timeline pulling in from the key deliverables, regardless of it being agile or not, where we can see the overall delivery plan, something we also had to develop on our own. Here you have your projects that are part of the Grow portfolio, and we can then expand and see what goes on. Let me just do this one and see all of them. Some have a project plan or a schedule we can look into, some do not. But for those who have, we can drill into them and understand what goes on below and further below. We can even expand everything to the absolute lowest level and filter by certain task types. For instance, deliverables, that would be a delivery plan, your critical milestones, your legal matters, all gate decisions, and remember, across everything you have in your system. So pretty powerful as well, and definitely something I wanted to show today. So to wrap the whole thing up with a few minutes left, if I go to portfolio reports, this is where we embed the reporting story. This is the output and why we need tools to do all of this. So here I can see in Power BI, if you want to embed it inside here or on your tablets or mobile phones, for instance, how much aligned we are in terms of strategy. Are we over or under spending our money on strategic themes? Right now, we are spending absolute no money on next generation products, and we're spending 15% on something that is not related to anything. Maybe you should click here and understand what that is to see if it's just wrongly created, it misses a tag of some kind, or whatever it is. We can also see revenue growth wise. This is that portfolio or that strategy. We have a couple of projects there. We can see the forecast variance, red KPIs, and so on. We can also filter by all the projects or initiatives that are in the intake process, so not under execution, to see if that helps us. To be honest, that makes it even worse here. We're still completely misaligned on strategy, money-wise, and not spending anything on what we should spend money on up here, regardless of all the money we might add to the pipeline. So another view could be, again, this portfolio dashboard, your financials, ideas coming through, key deliverables that are delayed or on time across different projects, resources that are assigned. We could flip the whole view to something that is more time-phased, like this one, which is showing you progression, trends on earnings, trends on risks, trends on number of projects by KPI, trends on finance, trends on risks with the play access to see if things are moving around as they should or shouldn't do, and resource hours, where we predict using relative time, today's date being day 0, looking backwards, and therefore predicting forward what is most likely going to happen. And that's the reason why you need to have snapshots of all your data. We also have the real-time dashboards like this that I started off with, showing, again, where we can zoom in and zoom in and zoom in to understand what's happening in our portfolio. And this sort of concludes my planned demo for today, as it's now 12:15. So for the next 10 minutes, we are opening up the Q&A here for any questions you might have that you've seen. And I also have a few supportive slides that I want to visit in terms of how does one example look like when it comes to doing for instance, a status report on an Agile initiative. And I actually have an example on that. But I would like to start now with seeing if there are any questions at all. No. We only have a few I can see. Some have already been answered. And then there is one which is around the status reporting that I just mentioned. Maybe I should just go for that immediately. Let me just go down here. So let me just close this one down. I think it's easier. Come on, Rebo. Right now my PowerPoint is just frozen completely. Don't know why. Can't launch PowerPoint. That's not good. All right. Let's see here. That I'm not allowed to do. So just quickly, I'm going to stop share screen and see if I can open it up again. That worked. Good. So going through to nice build stuff. Close. I need to reboot it, open it up again, and now I can have PowerPoint working. So that's good. We'll share screen in just a second. Go. There, there, and there. Sorry. We're back. Here we go. And I'm just waiting to see if others can see it as well, and you can. Good. So this is one example on a status report where instead of looking at, of course, how much are we done, then in this context, since it's agile, it's a one-pager. So you have sort of like business value, actual hours, actual cost. And the way we do it is that you have, again, relative time. You have sprints and PIs or increments we can pull in from your agile systems. And we can then track whether or not we are on time or not, to see if we are doing enough features as we should by counting how many features we should do. We also have a link directly to DevOps. And we also can see the overall expectations on finish and start date. And then further down, we have program epics where the portfolio epic, which this is, becomes unique program epics, each with their own sets of features planned. So 10, 8, 10, 15, and 5, so 48 features in total. How many of these are planned to have been done by today's date, and how many are done? And because it's relative time, we understand that we are now 2 ahead. So we've done 2 more than we should, which is good performance-wise. This means progress-wise, we are at 55%. So this is one way of doing it. There's business value as well, and there's actual hours done. So reporting time against this is being done as well. This means we have actual cost compared to business value, so we can also understand how much money we are expecting to get from this. And then we have the team performance being great, no data, and good, also pending on progression in terms of time being relative. This is just to give one example on how some have looked into doing this. Of course, if it was a normal traditional project, you would still see certain things like this. Most of these would apply still, but this would be like a Gantt chart almost. And of course, with a much more static approach to are we going to make it or not by looking at the end date or the key deliverable date rather than looking at planned tasks done by today's date and so forth. And then I have another question here saying, can you please elaborate a bit on AI and what your plans are integrating this into your solution? Well, absolutely. Let me just switch back to this one. It's easier to show. So if we open up the beautiful backend of Power Apps, then actually you'll see something that looks like this. So inside, once you have Power Apps, you might have the app I just showed you. This is the app I showed you. So that's it. But you also have all your data, your entities, your workflows, your imports, and so forth. But you also have the AI builder part up here. So AI is a native part of Power Apps. The same thing with chatbots and the same thing with processes. So if I open up down here, click on build, this is where we have different ways of doing AI. Some of them are premium, which means they have an added cost by Microsoft. It's another license. Some of them are just part of the Power Apps experience. Category classification, entity extraction, form processing, object detection, and prediction, predicting when something will happen. So this is a premium one, the prediction part. And this is where you can go in and set up a model, an AI model, where you can see, based on certain input and historical data, of course, what is most likely going to happen when it could be all the way as to create a task. You add a certain team, you estimate it, and because the task has the name blueprint for software, then it understands that label actually typically means we are going to be 20% delayed if we only have 20 hours added to it. So really complex scenarios. So there are best practices for how to do it. So when you create an AI model, you'll be guided through the experience. Obviously, that's a good example. You need to create some sort of a name for it. And then, of course, you need data. If you don't have data, you can't do it. So data is the #1 priority. So you want to first of all find which entity in our system are you going to do AI on. And AI could be for your projects or your snapshots or your stages or whatever you have, projects. Which field is most likely relevant to sort of show you the historic outcome to predict future outcome? This is where you probably don't have that data out of the box. You need to have some data in first before you can do it. But at some point when you find it, you'll end up when it will start, producing some fields you can work with, and it will show you related entities and will give you examples that I think I have it. If I just close this one down somewhere, models. I guess you only have this one right now. That's not good. Okay, but at some point you have your model, and then you need to start training it. That's the final part. You train it, it shows you the impact, and it also shows you a score of your AI capability, whether or not you are above or below a certain threshold percentage-wise. So if, in other words, can you trust what the AI model is saying or not? There are certain thresholds you need to look into. So not being the full expert in AI, I have done a few in another demo environment that works. A little bit trivial though. One was to actually scan. You can argue if that's AI or not, but actually process a forms. When we got invoices, we automatically uploaded the PDFs and tagged the various data, which then became our revenue or our actual cost inside the projects. That's one example, but it could be so many other things. Risk management, you walk around in some construction site, you take a picture with your cell phone, and instead of having to explain what the picture is, it writes the text for you because it understands the context of what you're looking at, and then it adds that to your risk log, for instance. So AI, of course, for us, we will be looking into AI models, but more from a algorithm perspective. We want to have hardcore algorithms to predict resource management scenarios, which is not as easy as a model, which is what I'm showing you right now. So AI is for all, I guess, but then algorithms are for the few, and we are definitely also into the algorithm phase. And we have another question. Yeah, where is the work with the feature definition, which leads to having 10 features in one epic? That's also a good question. I would say in most scenarios, we see that features are always created in the Agile system. So DevOps or Jira, if it's an Agile software team. More or less every time, I have to say. We can, of course, have features as a thing in this system as well. If I just go back, I'm not showing them right now, but of course, if you open up an epic, could be anyone, let's take this one. We could, of course, have the features here and create them from the ground up. Right now, I only use features as a thing to import data to, not to create it from within the system. But that's how it's working right now. So if you want to control features more, you can do that as well. Then we have another question. In a situation where the base data is missing, project progress, time feeding, and other portfolio needs, do a report. Is it possible to do a temporary report based on input from the project manager alone until the base data is available again? Yes, definitely. Actually a good idea, I think. So thanks, Pierre, for that question or idea. Normally, when we do status reporting on this view, here, you will also see, you can also almost customize a form where you can on the left side see current values with a sort of like a checklist if you have some updates or not. And then on the right-hand side could be your manual input area where you can type in and sort of overwrite the data quality with your input. That's how I would do it. Also so that when you produce the report, you can actually show to the receivers that, yes, this is a budget that's based on actual cost in this month, but it's manually inputted by me. But of course, I would do that. It would make a whole lot of sense. And then I think I can see from my producer in front of me, perhaps where we have to end. Yeah, great. All right, then thank you all for watching today. Don't hesitate if you want to reach out and learn more. We have for sure various ways of doing that. I just added this one, so if you want to see more or learn more or try more, you can always go to powerppm.net or on our YouTube channels, and we will share the slides and the video and the links to these studies soon after when the recording is done producing. So, sure. And now I'm being told with a finger that there's one more. Have you deployed this for big enterprises? How does scalability work? We have only deployed this for big enterprises. So absolutely. I would love to see more mid-sized or smaller companies doing it as well, because I think the price point is low. But yes, it does scale to the extreme amount of millions and millions and millions of lines of data without you feeling it when you have to open up your projects or tasks and so on. This is not to be compared with SharePoint. Just to be clear on that, for those who've tried that journey, SharePoint scales to a certain point and then it stops scaling, especially in the old version of SharePoint. So it's really, really meant to be for big enterprises with lots of data. And the same Dynamics F&O financial system and Dynamics CRM and other dynamic solutions also run on this architecture. So really made for big data. And then I think we are done with the final question. So thanks again for watching and reach out.